Hey, it's Dr. G. And whether you've been a longtime listener or you're new to the podcast, welcome. Have you ever felt like you wanted to start over or reinvent your life? If so, I want to invite you to tell me all about it. I really need your advice. And to reward you for your time, I'm going to be choosing 9 listeners to join me on a free one-on-one relaunch game plan call. This call is designed to help you get clear on your specific goals so you can relaunch your life. To join in and be eligible for the free call, go to discover.drgordon.me. That's discover.drgordon.me and answer all the questions. I look forward to reading your responses and talking to you soon. Thanks for your help, and thanks for launching your life with me. Hello, and welcome to the Launch Your Life podcast, the only mindset podcast that provides weekly actionable insights for lasting happiness and change for high-achieving professionals who are ready to bounce back from burnout. I'm your host, Dr. G, and today we're talking to Suzanne Falter. After losing her daughter, Teal, in 2012, Suzanne discovered the healing power of self-care. She's the host of the Self-Care for Extremely Busy Women podcast and is the author of many self-help books, including The Extremely Busy Woman's Guide to Self-Care. She runs a Facebook community of over 55,000 women called Self-Care for Extremely Busy Women. During the podcast, we talk about grief and loss as an opportunity for growth, reinvention, parenting our inner child, recognizing and addressing burnout, setting appropriate boundaries, and much more. Stay to the end to find out how to fit exercise and meditation together into your busy life. Every day at 8:30 a.m. Eastern, I post on LinkedIn. Follow me there and just search for Dr. Michelle Gordon to get actionable life launching tips. And when you're ready to create change in your life, reach out to me on LinkedIn or by email, drg@drgordon.me. I'm happy to talk to you to find out if you're a fit for one of our life-changing programs. Thanks for launching your life with me. Now let's get to Suzanne. Suzanne, welcome to our podcast, the Launch Your Life podcast. Tell me a little bit about yourself.
Hello, Dr. G. Glad to be here. Well, I wander onto podcasts like this sometimes because my focus is self-care, and I got there through extreme crisis. In 2012, okay. I was a workaholic, super driven, type A, had been for decades, kind of gal who had really bottomed out in my career. I had a business that was very successful, and I had to close it because I was burning out. Mm-hmm. And the relationship I was in had also just ended, and I had just moved into an apartment with this partner, and so I had to move out. And I had found myself in July of 2012 with no work, no home, and no relationship. And I was driving around the Bay Area in a little car with my stuff in the back. And I was kind of new to the Bay Area. Yeah. I'd only lived there a few years. And my daughter, Teal, had come out to join me in California. And she was just getting set up in her own apartment. And I went out to dinner one night with her in August. And she went back to her little apartment and had a massive cardiac arrest and died 6 days later.
Oh, wow. How old was she?
She was 22. And she died from an unexplainable cardiac arrest. And this is important because Teal really wanted to be a healer. And she had been a blues singer. She was a trained blues singer. And one day she just was like, I've got to heal people. I don't know how. And she was just about to start taking classes at City College in San Francisco the next day. And so when I went to the hospital and saw her all stretched out, her heart was restarted, but she never came out of her, she was in a coma basically, and she never came out of it because she had extensive brain damage from being without a heartbeat for some time. But her heart was started again, and she was sort of in this limbo state for about 6 days. And I saw her lying on the bed, and I knew that she would die. But I also knew that I would be reborn in some strange way, and it had a lot to do with her desire to help people. and that I was going to put away this work that wasn't resonant, and I was going to stop being such a self-involved, overworked, kind of brutal, somewhat narcissistic, driven lady. And I was going to calm down, and I was going to redo everything about my life. So it was pretty convenient. I no longer had a career, relationship, or a home. So very slowly over the next 2 years, in a very humble way, I didn't work. I didn't do any work for 2 years. And I spent that time just focusing on self-care and really learning about how to take care of my own needs. And out of that came my work as an author and a podcaster. And I am here to help other busy, driven women find self-care. And I'm here to help people go through crises and turn them into life-enhancing experiences. Because what I'll say now, almost 10 years later, is that I am the happiest I've ever been in my entire life. And it can happen, even after a major loss.
I talk a lot about meaning and how whatever meaning we ascribe to an event is the experience we're going to have. And for you, it sounds like you took the death of your daughter and you made it a birth for you.
Yeah.
And in a lot of people, what happens is they have a crisis, and a circumstance happens. The circumstance itself is neither good nor bad. It just is. And we, as humans with emotion who are self-aware, we have to then start to deal with what that emotion means to us, and how much we want to suffer. And so I think that this is so poignant. My son had cancer when he was a baby, and so I've seen a lot of death. I'm also a surgeon. I've seen a lot of death.
Oh yeah, of course.
And the way I look at the negative circumstances, the things that you could see as negative, the things that happened to me, the abuse, or these weird traumas, is I see them as this opportunity to create a new story.
Yep, that's right. They are an opportunity to create a new story, and they're an opportunity to let your life become the life you want instead of the life you thought you were supposed to lead. Because I'll tell you, Dr. G, I was all about making money, and it became really fun and sexy and titillating when it happened. And then the minute the bottom dropped out, it became like the last thing I cared about. And this was my moment of really being in the fulcrum of what counts in life. It was like all of the excess nonsense got burned away. And I was suddenly in a place where I could really tell the truth about what I didn't like about my life. And the very first thing I didn't like was my work, as lucrative as it may be. And then the second thing I didn't even like earning a lot of money, because you were on the hook for so much stuff. You were suddenly responsible for all these things, Yeah,
no, that's so good. I mean, once you get your basic needs met, it's a lot. There's a thing about money, and you can get to a certain point where it doesn't really improve the quality of life anymore. It just is,
that's right.
More money.
Yeah.
And, for me, I had a multi-million-dollar surgical practice, and I hated every day. I hated opening the door. I hated dealing with the hospital. I took one, and then the pandemic happened, and hospitals got even more locked down and more controlling than they were. And it felt like going to a prison every day. And I said, I don't have to do this. And I stopped. And that was like early in the pandemic, like June or July or something. And I was like, I can't do this anymore. So I think there's a good opportunity for us to talk about burnout. We spend a lot, this podcast is really for, high achieving professionals who want to bounce back or prevent burnout. And so maybe we can talk a little bit about what the first signs that you were burned out for you.
That's a great question, because I think this is where we all get stuck. And, I was so busy trying to pretend that everything was okay that I couldn't even acknowledge the signs of burnout. And the first one was I didn't like what I was doing. And I began to resent my clients. And I had a fun business partner, this lovely man who lived over in the Castro, and I was in San Francisco, and, everything was groovy, and I'd just come out, and he was like helping me, explore the fun gay world of the Bay Area, and it was all cool.
Absolutely.
And then I'd have to come home and actually do the coaching. And it was like, oh, my energy just like totally drooped. And I was grateful to help people, and I definitely helped people, but I was feeling like a fraud because I was presenting myself as a real front of the room dazzler, and I'm not that person. I'm kind of shy, actually. And I knew enough about public speaking. I'd done a lot of it, and I knew how to lead a workshop, and I had this cool guy with me on stage, and we were leading these big events, and it was just like this big spiral that just kept going up and up and up, and I started hating it more and more. And he broke up with one of his boyfriends like an hour before one of our events, and he was like, it was just way too much intensity and too much drama, and
lots of drama.
I mean, God, and I mean,
you get the queen drama going on.
No kidding, and God love him, I wouldn't have wanted to be in the same place at all, but I had the totally dysfunctional relationship going on as well, and the two of us were just, we always used to say we were like Jack and Jill going up the hill, like, to get our little pail of water, trying to like get through this work we felt we'd been given. And the work was pretty cool, but I felt like I was in overwhelm a lot. And I think the early signs were exhaustion, overwhelm, way too much overstimulation. That's one of the great things about having the excellent excuse of grieving for a period of time. You just say, I can't do it, I'm grieving. And nothing happened for 2 years. Like, I didn't have any clients. I didn't have any. Well, I mean, I tried to restart my business a few times, and each time it failed miserably, like really badly, like people hacking into the website, taking it down, kind of thing. And all of it
that's
just,
really interesting.
Just disappeared.
But because the universe was pushing you, and I have this one client who talks about how the universe like came and made her fall off of a horse because she was running away from her calling. And it sounds like the universe is really pushing you in the same way to be more, in the healing space by, getting hacked and things like that. And so I think this is just so fascinating. So when it comes to recovering from burnout, a lot of like corporate burnout kind of programs, we'll say take some self-care, and there's a lot more to it than that, though, than just like setting boundaries and doing some self-care. And I post on LinkedIn every day, and one of the things I posted a few weeks ago was about how there is a system that is creating burnout in the corporate world, in the medical world, and we're allowing it. And I don't know. I'm not a big, I'm not interested in really being a big change agent in some other corporation. And so for me, it was like, what can I do for me? What kind of life do I want? How do I, where do I want to go? How do I want to make money? And that sort of thing. And I realized that I did not want to be tied to a hospital. That wasn't, and I didn't want to be treated like the chattel, on a farm. And I said, there's got to be a better way. And so I just quit.
We do what we must.
Yeah. So what, you say that you help people with self-care. So let's talk about what is self-care.
Well, what self-care is to me is it is an inside job. It's about asking for help. It's about knowing you need it. It's about being vulnerable enough with other people to let them in a little so you aren't doing everything alone. And it is about setting boundaries, because boundaries are where we begin. And so many of the women in, say, my Facebook group or the podcast listeners I hear from, they are unable to figure out where to even begin to reclaim their lives. And busy driven women who are successful are leaders of that pack. because so many of us have been caught up in the demands of clients and bosses and boards of directors and constituents and whoever we're leading. We believe that we can't stop or the world will crumble. And so there's a whole set of myths, real myths we tell ourselves about self-care that really destroy it. And the number one is that there's no time for self-care, that you can't get to it. But there's no time because you've designed a life that isn't yours, right? So then number 2 is I can't say no, or everybody will be disappointed, or they'll hate me, or there simply is nobody else who can do this, or nobody will do it as well as me. Well, it's all bullshit, it's just not true. And what's not true about it is everything, because there's, if you were, God forbid, hit by a bus and you wind up in Dr. G's operating theater or former operating theater, and you got to be put back together, and there's nobody to, do the laundry and run the presentation and, drive the kids to school. And life will go on for all of those people without you. Yeah,
exactly. So one thing I like to tell people is, what do people do when their doctor dies?
Right.
They get another doctor. Yeah. I mean, and so I especially tell that to doctors because, at the end of the day, we have to, no one else is going to care for our time the way we do. And we have to really be responsible. I mean, I'm a true believer in radical responsibility and in everything. We get the outcomes that we create. based on how we choose to think and how we choose to believe things. And if we're not getting the outcomes that we want, it might be because we are not choosing to look at our habits and the things that's creating our lives. So you gave us a couple of myths of self-care. What are the 5 basics of self-care?
Well, the basics are all about this inside job, like I said. And the first one is understanding your needs. And so many of us are unwilling to look at our needs, or just haven't in such a long time that we don't know how to access them, that this is where all self-care begins. And I suggest anybody listening this begin to ask themselves the simple question of, what do I need right now? And you will be shocked by what you hear. And you might be surprised if you hear like crickets, you don't have any idea what you need. So getting in touch with what you need is the number 1 step. But then number 2 is getting that put in place, which may mean setting some boundaries. And setting a boundary is simply saying no in a non-dramatic, straightforward, clear, firm, polite way that allows everybody to understand that you are taking up space and it's okay. There's no apologizing, there's no justifying, there's no explaining it. There's just, I need to start taking Fridays off, and how can we make that work for you? It's not like we're giving the world, flipping the bird to the world. We're not doing that. What we're doing is we are getting very clear where we begin and where others end and we begin. And one of the things that you can do to really know that is to listen to your body. Now, Teal, I learned a lot of self-care from Teal, my daughter who passed away, because she left behind some notebooks that were really helpful. And in my book, The Extremely Busy Woman's Guide to Self-Care, I quote a lot of those really fundamental things. And one of them was to listen to your body, to really tune into your body, because your body's always telling you when someone is dishonest, when you are angry and you've had enough. Your body is telling you when you're exhausted and you need to sleep. Your body will answer that question of what I need right now if you stop long enough and create enough space to hear it. And number 3, once you're clear on that, you begin to ask for help. And this was probably, as a real type A woman, this was the hardest thing for me, because I always believed I had to be the hero in every situation, that I really wasn't safe relying on other people to step forward and, and accept their help. like, what would that mean about me? It would mean that I couldn't do something for once, My picture of myself as this, super confident superwoman. Well, that super confident superwoman was hiding a little kid who was really afraid of people and afraid to not be brilliant and amazing at everything. And I wasn't actually brilliant and amazing at everything, but I just had myself, sort of jazzed to believe that other people thought I was. I mean, it was all just a big web of illusions. And that went out the window when Teal died, right? And number 4, the fourth basic, of course, is just very simple, is to take action. It's to actually tell yourself, okay, so I notice I'm not moving. I need to start moving my body, something that really is true for a lot of us since we got real comfy during the pandemic. And what you have to do is you start to build self-care into your day. So you take action by figuring out what's that exercise going to be, what's it look like, how am I going to move, and you make it fun for yourself. You're going to actually put on a juicy novel on some headphones, an audiobook, and you're going to walk in a pretty park, or you're going to take, a hot bath every Friday night with, candlelight and crystals and whatever would make it really juicy, or you're going to find your way to, a lovely bookstore if you like to browse for books, or take yourself out for a lovely meal, or, what would be fun for you? How can you get some alone time? And then the 5th step is you put it in your schedule. You schedule self-care time for you. And alone time counts. In fact, the neurological studies are that people who create time for themselves are just better able to handle the stressors of life. You are feeling stressed out probably because you can't hear yourself think. But once those voices get, subdued, and maybe people will just take themselves out of the rat race, you mentioned leaving your practice. Maybe people will dial back the number of hours they're available for work. Maybe it'll become a reasonable thing. Maybe they'll start taking lunch again. Maybe they will, use flexible hours or share their job with someone else, or maybe they'll find a different one. That's just the work scenario. Then you get home, and it's all about asking your partner and your children to help you. And if you have no partner and you have no children, you get help in other ways. You find people in the community who would like to do a swap, or you hire a cleaning person, or, whatever it takes to create time for you to do more than just collapse and drink a glass of wine or several when you get home, right?
Yeah, no, that's really good. I think one of the things that really struck me in your list there was that you said that there was a kind of a harmed little kid, and so much of what happens in our lives is a result of everything that we learned, all the programming that happened, when we were children. And the only way to get over that is to actually pay attention to it and then be the adult in that relationship and heal that child. But that's hard work. And not everybody wants to take a look at all that trauma that may have occurred when they were children, because I really think childhood is like a series of traumas that we have to deal with. And then, now not everyone has a traumatic childhood, but there are still, you think about how mean children are to each other, and how that kind of affects us as we grow up, and that sort of thing. And so I just thought that there was a really good opportunity for that. And then I wanted to ask you a question about those people who are working from home and there's like really nobody else around. How do, because now with the Great Resignation and people really wanting to stay home and not have to go in anywhere, how do we create that space, that time? Because now work is at home.
Okay, great question. And I can answer it as somebody who has worked at home since 1985. And one of the very first things I learned is you have to have a schedule, and there's work time and there's play time. And I try to keep my schedule super consistent. It's only now, 35 years later, that I'm letting myself be a little more flex. But I'm like I said, I'm a writer and a podcaster myself, and I'm doing time zones at different times of the day for different work projects. But I also am clear as I get into my 60s that I need to spend time with my wife. I need to spend time with our dog. I need to spend time with my friends. And I need to, spend time talking to my sisters and my brother and my son. And, it's like I've got people out there counting on me. And work isn't as important as it used to be. So I do that wonderful rule of the 80-20 rule. And I don't do that 80% of the work that really isn't that essential. Like, I haven't filed a paper in 5 years, I just don't do paper. And it saves a lot of time, that kind of thing. I also have taken the pressure off myself in trying to get everything super excellent, and I just make it good enough. And good enough takes less time, and it is less stressful.
Does.
And sometimes I pay extra. Like, could I edit my podcast myself? Sure, but I have a great team, and I like what they do, so I pay them. And, is it a little less money for my retirement? Sure. But is it all going to be okay? It will definitely be okay. It's like we have to make decisions that allow us to hold these zones. And then I can get up from my desk and go for a walk at 2:30 in the afternoon because I want to. Because I've done, I've checked off the box. So now I've dialed back to about 3 or 4 hours of work 4 days a week. And that's about it. And they kind of sprinkle through my day in a slightly less rigid structure than they used to. But, the other thing I like to do working at home is have a really nice workspace. And you are talking to me in an office. It's got a door. It's a separate room. It's in another part of our house from everything else. There is a dog who wanders by who waved a paw earlier. And, she's got her little zone. I got my little zone. It's all separate, And, I think trying to maintain, even if you have to put your office in the corner of a living room or a dining room, just create a little screen or something around it so it feels like a separate space. Because when you're in that space, then you put on your work brain. When you go sit on the couch and you're watching, whatever you're watching on TV or you're relaxing or you're meditating, you're in your not work zone, and that is more important than your work zone.
Yeah, no, that's really good. I actually have an office as well, and I've tried working in multiple areas of my house. I've got a pretty big house, and I found that this works. And I've set up a studio here, and I'm able to get my writing done when I have to write, and every podcast is done here. Now, when I'm on the road, I just use a laptop and a good microphone, and so it's and I make it okay. It has to be, like you said, good enough. So let's talk about being extremely busy and how that's probably just a mental model more than anything else.
Well, what can I tell you? For better part of 40 years, I really believed that if I wasn't extremely busy, I guess it was 32 years between the beginning of my career and when Teal died. If I wasn't extremely busy, I didn't deserve to walk the face of the planet. I just thought busyness validated me. And I think a lot of us think that. And, going back to the inner child will tell us the world is not safe. You better hustle. You got to do what it takes to stay ahead of the mean girls and the bad kids and the rough parents and whoever else was in your space, making life hard. You've got to hustle to stay safe. And that will often drive us to overwork. And I know that was very true for me. And the overwork I experienced was really I didn't even question taking on more responsibilities all the time. It was like, bring it on. And I think I was pretty addicted to the adrenalized feeling I had of overworking. And when it all went away and I was quiet for 2 years, my whole nervous system recovered. It took 2 years. It took 2 years for my adrenaline to just kind of re-regulate, and my energy started to come back. And I was grieving, so, things were very, very askew and quiet. But then at the end of that period of time, when I was just getting into the relationship that is now my marriage, I began to really feel like I had been reborn and like something really had changed for me fundamentally. And I had energy. And the best thing was I felt like my little inner child was happy. And she's still pretty happy and bouncy, and I just have more joy. I just have more joy in life, and things have become more playful, you know?
Yeah, that's great. Well, it's really good that I think there are certain kind of defining moments that happen in our lives that we have choices. It's it's this place where we can decide how we want to react to it. My son had cancer. Does that mean that my life is over? I ended up going to medical school. Right? So for you, I think one of the things that I think is so powerful is learning how to handle grief. And the longer we live, the more grief we're going to have, because we're going to outlive people. Yeah. And, we're going to see things that maybe, we didn't expect to see. I mean, death is never expected, even though we know it's coming. And so it's like this paradox for us. And so what do you say to somebody who is still stuck in grief? Because I'm sure, I watched my father, he lost 2 sons while I was still alive, and while he was still alive, and he would just break down in tears sometimes. And so how do you handle it when the waves of grief come?
Well, what I want to say about grief is that when you have a sudden, shocking grief event, like my daughter's death was for me, it takes a year to acknowledge it happened and to really get it. Yeah. Because you keep thinking you can call them. I should buy that gift. No, wait a minute, she's not here anymore. It's like that. I think I gave myself full permission from the very beginning to cry as much, as often, as noisy, as loudly, as, ugly as possible. I put Kleenex everywhere in my life, and I cried, I just wept and wailed and sobbed and really cried a lot. And, I did some research on crying, and the chemical composition of tears of grief is different than the composition of tears for, crying from laughter or crying in frustration. And I think it's part of the body's way of soothing ourselves. So the first thing I would say is cry a lot. And then the second thing I would say is stop and make space for the grief and make space for the tears. Because if I could have worked through it, and I know people who have worked through their grief, and that's what keeps you grieving for the rest of your life. You cannot get around it. You have to go through it. But you can handle it. You were built to handle it. No grief is too large to tolerate. No matter how, if I can do this with Teal's death, because Teal and I were extremely close, if I can go through her loss, anybody can grieve anything. And, I've met a guy who lost his entire family and his children, his wife, the whole family, over the course of 5 years. One by one, they all died. And the kids, small children even. It was just this extraordinary string of events. There were like 4 people around this guy who died. And he survived and went on to just teach people about massive grief. And, they always say when you lose a child, you become better or you become bitter, because the opportunity is to take what has happened to you and change your life in a positive way and perhaps even help other people. Or stay fixated on the fact that something you didn't expect happened that was really, really devastating for you, and make it be devastating every day. And then you get to hang out not in grief, but in your resistance and your anger to the grief.
Yeah, that's really good. There's a couple books that come to mind when you started talking about that, and one is Joan Didion's The Year of Magical Thinking, which is probably the best book on grief I've ever read. It's a play, but I got it on Audible. It was free on Audible with my subscription, and it was read by some really fantastic actress, and it was just so profound that I keep on thinking about it. It was just really a good, because it's like sudden loss and grief. The other book I think about as you talk about going through things is Ryan Holiday's book called The Obstacle is the Way. And we tend to want to resist the change that comes into our life, but really the only constant is change.
Yeah.
And so the more we can start to accept and acknowledge and kind of be like the water, we're going to be able to, kind of get through whatever life sends us. So with that, we're almost out of time. What's one practical tip that you can give to the listeners that is going to, give them some actionable kind of stuff to move them forward?
Well, I'm assuming your busy, driven women do not have time to meditate and probably don't move their bodies as much as they'd like to. So I'm going to suggest you combine them with a 20-minute walk in nature, because 20 minutes walking in nature is the equivalent of 2 hours walking in a city in terms of your nervous system and understanding how you flow with the universe, because it's all around us when we do a little forest bathing. And I'd also say, come on over to my Facebook group for extremely busy women, which is 55,000 women who are all showing up and helping each other figure out all this stuff. And also my podcast, Self-Care for Extremely Busy Women, where I have all kinds of interesting people sharing their insights about self-care.
Awesome. And where can people find you?
SuzanneFalter.com. It's S like Sam, U-Z, A-N-N-E, F like Frank, A-L-T like Tom, E-R.com.
Suzanne, thanks so much for being a part of the Launch Your Life podcast today. I really appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Dr. G. Great.